All right, we've talked a lot about this disinformation campaign against the COVID lab leak theory, which is looking more and more plausible every day. Well, two now discredited articles were the most influential in setting this narrative early on. First, that Lancet letter that was orchestrated by Peter Daszak, who funneled your tax dollars to the Wuhan lab. He was kind of the intermediary. And second, a Nature paper, the journal Nature, led by Scripps scientist Christian Andersen, who recently deleted his entire Twitter account. But the Epoch Times unearthed new emails that show how these articles came into being, plus how these same scientists and Fauci held a secret meeting to influence a National Academies of Sciences report on COVID's origins to the Trump White House. Joining us now is Kelvin Drogemeyer, former director of White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and Anthony Ruggiero, former NSC official and senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Kelvin, I know you weren't at that first February 3rd meeting, but someone in your staff in your office attended in person or virtually. But can you tell us about the meetings in the early part of this pandemic? Because all we have are, just sketches of information that relates to this question of the Chinese virus origin.
Right, Laura. Good evening. Thank you so much. In those early days, we were really dealing with lots of things. And of course, fundamentally, we were saying to ourselves, how did this happen? Where did it come from? It's kind of the natural thing to ask. And so one of the early things that we looked at was, do we have enough data? Can we really determine the origin? It's very much like, say, an aircraft accident or, for example, a natural disaster or maybe even a crime scene. You want to get in there as quickly as possible, get the information you need, which will allow you then later on to do post facto analyses. So that was our early thinking, was to do that. And we asked the National Academies on February 3rd to convene a group of experts to do exactly that, to look at the data that we would actually need to do those sorts of analyses, not only then, but looking forward into the future.
And one of the people most relied upon was Anthony Fauci, correct?
Yes, he was, I believe, at that February 3rd meeting.
And so his analysis would have been critical to understanding what was known right at that moment about origins, natural or lab created.
Right. I think in those early days, we had Deborah Birx at the White House. Tony Fauci was there. A whole bunch of people eventually on the coronavirus task force were looking at many, many things. And so certainly his voice was a very important one as an advisor to the president.
All right. Mr. Ruggiero, on this issue, buried in the annex of China's part of this WHO joint study on COVID's origins is this quote. The Wuhan Virology Institute director raised the issue of conspiracy theories, reiterating that the institute had worked with the media to stress the need to respect science in the fight against COVID-19 and to rebut the theories. The international team's visit could help to diffuse some of the theories that were circulating. Well, Anthony, it seems clear now, a lot of this is in retrospect, but a lot of us had questions at the time, that China wanted to move off this lab leak theory really fast and did its best to manipulate this international team that was supposed to be doing some type of investigation early on. Your thoughts?
I mean, we were at some level flying blind because the Chinese were hiding information from us even then. I mean, it's hard to believe at the beginning of a global pandemic that a country would hide that information from everyone in the world that could help us tackle this pandemic. But on origins, even to this day, a year and a half later, perhaps even more than a year and a half later after the pandemic began, China is still hiding information from us, from the WHO. In the same report that you cited, it cites that they're hiding 76,000 cases of illnesses that are similar to COVID-19 from fall 2019. They're also not allowing the WHO to test blood samples from those who give those samples annually from the fall to see if the virus was circulating. And also, we know that lab has not, they've actually taken their database offline of the viruses they're studying, so they're not, because they, quote, claim that it's cyber attacks. That went down conveniently in September 2019.
Did we need to have a healthier skepticism of our own public health officials, given their connection to this Wuhan lab?
Well, it's a great question, Lauren. I think some of the things that are coming to light potentially show conflicts of interest that needed to be disclosed at that time. The question really was, how did it get into the public domain? How did it start spreading, and why did it start spreading? Was it genetically manipulated in a lab? Did it leak from a lab accidentally? Was it a non-modified virus that leaked from the lab? We don't have that. So part of it is the natural origin, but then part of it is how did it actually then start to replicate and spread dramatically quickly?
This was Tony Blinken. I want to play this as Secretary of State being pressed on this question of the origin of this virus again. Watch.
What's the real pressure the U.S. will put on China for access to the lab?
If China denies the information, denies the access, denies the transparency that's needed,
and you kind of expect that.
Well, let's see.
Been the history.
Mike, at the end of the day, it's profoundly in China's interest to do this as well.
Anthony, this is the second time an administration official has said this, first being Anthony Fauci. So Blinken's repeating Fauci that it is in China's interest for us to learn about the origins of the virus, I believe, in the Wuhan lab. It's in China's interest? Is that the most laughable thing you've ever heard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge mistake by Blinken. It was a mistake by Biden to not call out China's stonewalling in his statement last month that he put out on origins. It's going to hurt us because when they start doing pandemic preparedness, they're going to assume that countries are going to work with us. And China hid this pandemic. They hid the epidemic of SARS in the early 2000s. So maybe we should take the hint that China and other countries like them are going to hide this kind of information from us and prepare for it. And right now, we should call out their stonewalling, which is what, it's not an if. They are doing that right now.
Kelvin and Anthony, you were there in the early days. Thank you.